It was disgusting how people can sometimes act around other people.
Uncomfortable in a sense that I was also, first of all, I was catcalled. Second, because my friends thought that it was somewhat weird for me to stand up and shout back at them.
I am mortified and enraged because I fear for, like, more than as I fear for my safety, I fear the safety of other women who experience it with me, experience it the same way that I do.
Hi, my name is Lance. I am 23 years old and I identify as non binary. I actually have a business and I sell skincare products online.
My name is Therese, a 22 years old cis-het woman and a newly registered pharmacist.
I'm Kyle Ann, 22 years old, and I identify as a bisexual woman, and I am a human rights defender at Amnesty International Philippines.
To me, catcalling is
An array of things. At first, it would just plainly mean unwarranted sentiments thrown mostly at women or queer folk along the street in public spaces.
yeah, when someone gives you unwanted attention, usually in public.
Kind of unwelcome remarks from strangers, and that makes me uncomfortable every time I hear that.
It presents itself in different forms. So it could also mean staring at certain people longer than you should. It kind of feels of like it's catcalling, but it doesn't fit in the category, and people, the perpetrators, can easily just wiggle themselves out of these situations.
Yeah, I have experienced them plenty of times before, ever since I was young. The earliest memory I have is probably back when I was in elementary school.
Even I consider myself as an average person. I experience most of the time catcalling in different places, such as side of the roads, whenever I go home alone, and especially at night.
First experiences would be around our neighborhood, which is for me is very messed up thing to happen to a child. Next is at school. The streets that I walk in parties when I started to go to the social gathering. So it feels like I get catcalled everywhere I go. Like the potential is always there. Like it would be a surprise if you're not catcalled when you're going somewhere else.
So it was probably on the streets when I'm just walking alone, and I usually get catcalled from either older women or older gays who likes children, I guess.
I do not recall a time in my life that I wasn't catcalled. Even if I decide to dress down, even if I decide to, I try to hide myself when I walk in public spaces. Even if I try to be with a lot of people, it feels like it's inevitable and it has happened at all times of my life, even if when I was a kid.
The last time I can remember that I was catcalled was probably like a month ago. I was eating outside with my friends, and some girls decided that they wanted to get my attention. They started banging on the glass, and then they started calling me, and also they started filming me without my consent, and it made me feel uncomfortable and embarrassed at the same time as well. Overall, it was just not a good experience.
It was a recent one when we were walking at Lacson Street with my friends. We were going to Mascara Chicken, and a truck passed by, and they called out, "Ano ba, guwapa, ma'am." And I remembered my friend Kyle told me to always fight back every time there are catcallers in the vicinity. So I shouted back And that made my friends in state of shock because it was the first time that they heard someone fight back, perhaps in a catcalling. And I heard them at my back saying na, ako nga kuya, mahipos lang po na, ginapabayaan ko lang. So that had me reflect on my principles, of course. If it was right for me to fight back, or should I just leave it be and let the predators just do their thing?
This is around this year, months before, like 5 months before, where someone who's riding their like a big truck was like catcalling me, and I was walking the streets. And the tendency is I would put my earphones on when I walk so I don't hear it. But that time I didn't have my earphones on. So when I was walking, and this person that I don't know, a man, specifically a man, started to shout, Miga, Miga, guapa, guapa ba? So tapos they like whistling and shit. And I started to really retaliate. I shouted back. Like, mano ka nung how? Mano ka? And I stared down them. I would usually do this too, since I started to do this since 2 years ago. And the tendency of these men would always pick at your insecurities. Like, laway ka man, nga, laway ka man, tambok ka man, ano ka? Like, it's like it's my fault, like, which is, it's not. They started it. But it's nice to see them startled, feel startled, or look startled. So yeah, I fight back, but that doesn't really happen every time. Sometimes I don't.
I could never alleviate these kinds of experiences, but I try my best to dress decently, such as wearing long pants or sleeves, to prevent myself from being catcalled.
So for me, personally, it became like a defense mechanism for me to act unfriendly around people or around the public so that no one would dare to approach me.
Maybe in a more reactionary measures, that I do is, yes, I would dress down. Really, I would wear trousers even if it's like really hot. But that does not guarantee anything, because you still get catcalled, because it doesn't depend on how you dress, because catcallers will catcall you with any fabric that you're on.
If there are times that I could not control these kinds of catcalling, I would just be myself and walk boldly with my short shorts and skink pants and short sleeves, because I am a woman and I deserve freedom of expression.
I would usually walk in bigger groups to camouflage myself, so I feel safer when I walk. I also would make sure that I have a sharp object with me, which is, just for protection. But ultimately, what I do to alleviate these risks is, as a feminist, of course, I support the causes that prevent these kinds of violence that happens to women and queer folk. So policy lobbying, I take part on it. Mobilizations, demonstrations that connect itself to the broader problems of women in today that still happened before, decades before.
It impacted my life in a way that it made me develop social anxiety, I guess.
A big chunk of my life has been damaged by these circumstances, like these microaggressions, like that happened every day, every year. They clump together, and they have a big impact, even if like I don't want it to happen, or I don't anticipate it.
It was scary because you always have to be with a man or someone bigger than you so that you wouldn't be catcalled, especially in places like they're swarmed by men also.
It really did affect a lot on how I viewed myself. Like, my self-image had worsened over time, especially when I was reaching adulthood. Insecurity about my self-worth also. Body autonomy, mostly. I felt like my body did not belong to me. It belonged to the people, because I am a spectacle waiting to be observed. Mental health, yes. I actually stopped school for a year because of a sexual harassment. case that I was dealing during my first year at college. So that was pretty hard for me. Yes, and I'm still dealing with all of these things and at the same time fighting for a world that is rid of it.
It was not good. And also, as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, we all know that we're already dealing with other stuff. Imagine adding more to that. It felt heavier for me.
They need to know that these things are wrong. These things shouldn't happen because this is just a small part, a small portion of a bigger problem, which is rape culture. Catcalling is only one step. It's a chunk in the pyramid of rape culture. Because if you are capable of catcalling, and when your victims, if they're not empowered enough or liberated enough to fight for themselves, you feel like you are allowed to do other horrendous things. So, from catcalling, it can go to, well, really groping, it can eventually lead to abuse.
It is important for predators to know that the victims are uncomfortable and does not want to be catcalled because they would also experience the same way that the victims are feeling like they should not be doing this because I would feel conscious about myself.
People need to be aware of their little actions to other people because it can do so much harm than they can imagine. So I just want to say, let us be kind to each other and treat each other with love and respect.
So before they do it, they also have to think of how these things could happen to their own mothers, to their own sisters, cousins, loved ones, or female or queer that gets harassed daily din sa streets.
You should be called to action such that everyone can feel safe within these public areas and should not be conscious of how they should act, what they should wear, and how they should present themselves in public.
It is really important because it can help, even just a little, to make this world a safer place and a more comfortable place, especially for women and also those who are member of the LGBTQIA plus community.
It's important to intensify the call for the end of catcalling and street harassment because as small as we sometimes we view it compared to bigger picture of like sexual harassment for women, it's actually a start. It's a baby step towards this, graver things that could happen. We make sure that our women are safe not only in their homes, but we make sure that they get to live their full lives, dignified full lives wherever they go. And the streets serve as it's a lot of things. It could be your way home, your way to work, or a place for you to voice out. So we need to make sure that women are safe in our streets. This also ensures their growth in every aspect of the world.
Para sa ako, siguro, importante nga gina-call out ta ang isa't isa. Kagabantayanay ta, patsaganay, kag kung may makita ta nga sala, hindi ta magpa-gulag-gulag or turn a blind eye lang. Minsan friends ta pa na or ano, dapat sawayon gid kay para hindi mag-anad kag amo na i-normalize nga hindi na siya okay.
One of the first and most impactful initiatives that we could do as a community is to educate, especially young men and boys that could be probable predators of catcalling, so that they would be aware that it is not appropriate for people to make others feel uncomfortable, especially when they're feeling alone.
I believe that women are past, the empowerment phase, because at this point we don't need empowerment. What we need is liberation, like liberation from, these systems, because if you just empower women and then still there's these systems that they have to fight every day, it doesn't really make sense. So liberation comes with the abolishment of this system. So I would suggest, as a community, like in, in your local cities, is to like pass ordinances that cater to women's, especially towards women's and queer folks, protection in our streets, more implementation and enaction of these laws. Also is to create a curriculum or alter educational curriculums that teach men, especially young men, proper decorum, just basically how to be a decent human being. That includes to not do these things, because it's not women's fault that they get harassed. It's always the perpetrator's fault. It's never someone's dressing style, the amount of skin that they show. So I think it's more important that we teach our boys, the men, how to act right, so that women could be liberated enough to do whatever they want.
One of the following things that the city council or the government in particular to do, especially in these kinds of harassments, is to implement administrative orders or executive orders and laws to have them penalized and have sanctions so that they would learn their lessons and would not repeat the same mistakes again.
I think makabulig ang government bisan sa mga LGU na lang, like utangan budget or like ang tao nga ibutang sa amo na nga i-implement sa amo na nga patakaran is someone man bala who cares, who really cares, hindi nga aralan da for kay ginabayaran sila, kag someone nga aware gid sang nakaagyan sa mga victims man, kag also ano gid more seminars be or talks about it para ma-normalize siya in the long run.